History isn't always what it seems. We tend to picture it as this messy, totally chaotic jumble of events. But what if I told you that hidden in plain sight, there was a secret structure? A deliberate, almost unbelievable pattern in the reigns of medieval kings? Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so take a look at these names. They're all medieval Danish kings. It just feels like a random mess, right? I mean, it's just a long, confusing list of names you'd have to cram for a history test. And honestly, that's kind of how we usually think about ancient history. Just this big pile of chaotic facts.
But what if it's not random? Not at all. What if this list, and get this, a bunch of others just like it, actually contains a hidden code, a structure so precise, so deliberate, that it could completely change how we think about the historical record itself? That's the mystery we're diving into.
All right, so our investigation is going to start in Denmark. We're zeroing in on this specific period, roughly 400 years between 936 and 1332. And it's right here that some historians started noticing something, well, something that just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, check this out. When you take that jumbled up list of names and actually arrange them by date, a crazy pattern starts to pop out. After the very first king, the entire list breaks down into 3 distinct blocks. You can see them right here. Block 1, Block 2, and Block 3. And here's the wild part. Each block has exactly 8 rulers. Now, yeah, you'll see a couple of outliers, kings who kind of break the mold, and an interregnum, which is basically just a fancy word for a gap between kings, but the main structure, it's these 3 perfect blocks of 8. All of a sudden, that chaos we saw, it starts to look a lot more like a blueprint.
And it gets weirder. Just look at the bookends of each block, the first and last king. Block 1 starts and ends with a king named Harald. Block 2, it's Canute at the beginning and Canute at the end. And Block 3, yep, you guessed it, a Valdemar to start and a Valdemar to finish. That's not a coincidence. That's symmetry. And it's our first huge clue that something really strange is going on here.
But wait, there's more. The pattern gets even more specific. Let's look at the name Eric. In that second block of kings, the name pops up 3 times. Okay, now look at the third block. What do you see? It appears 3 times again, and in almost the exact same positions in the sequence. I mean, the chances of something like that happening just by random chance are, well, they're incredibly small.
So these naming patterns are already pretty mind-blowing. But when you start looking at the timeline, that's when the mystery gets even deeper. Honestly, this is where it starts to feel less like history and more like math.
All right, so here's the absolute kicker. From the start of that first block, back in 958, to the start of the second block, in 1080, it's exactly 122 years. Okay, that's interesting. But then, from the start of that second block to the start of the third one in 1202, you got it. It's another 122 years on the dot. We're talking about a precise, repeating rhythm, like a historical metronome ticking away over centuries.
Okay, let's just pause for a second. A super structured king list with repeating names and a perfect 122-year cycle just in one country, that's already bizarre. But what if I told you this wasn't just a Danish thing? Because this whole investigation is about to go pan-European.
So, if you go back and count up all the kings in this structured period in Denmark, you land on this number, 27. Now, by itself, that number doesn't really mean much, right? It's just a number. But what if that number is the key that unlocks this entire puzzle? The thing that connects what was happening in Denmark to the rest of Europe.
And this is where your jaw might hit the floor. Because during that exact same slice of medieval history, Hungary and Scotland, they also had exactly 27 rulers. Poland and Norway, they did too, if you account for a few minor little irregularities. Just let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about 5 different kingdoms separated by hundreds and hundreds of miles, all independently landing on the exact same, completely random-seeming number of kings. How is that possible?
And get this, the plot thickens. This pattern, this 27 rulers club, it's not a worldwide thing. Nope. It's a very specific regional phenomenon. You find it almost exclusively in the monarchies of Northern and Eastern Europe. And that concentration is a massive clue. It points to some kind of shared cultural practice, maybe even a secret code for writing history that only this part of the world was in on.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got symmetrical naming patterns, we've got a precise 122-year cycle, and now we have the exact same number of kings popping up across 5 different nations. The question is, what on earth could possibly explain all of this? Well, all of this leads to a pretty radical conclusion. These patterns, they're just too perfect, too precise to be a coincidence. It's just not statistically possible. So what does that mean? It means this probably wasn't history as it actually happened. The evidence strongly suggests these king lists were artificially constructed, that they were edited or maybe even partly invented long after the fact, all to fit some kind of hidden template.
So, the million-dollar question is, how could something like this even happen? Well, there are two main theories on the table. First up, Theory A. The idea here is that all of these king lists were basically fabricated, and they all came from one single common source that was distributed across Europe. Then there's Theory B. This one suggests that maybe one country's historians came up with this structure first, and it was just so good, so compelling that other kingdoms basically copied it, using it as a template to tidy up their own messy histories. And this leaves us with a really provocative final thought. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that none of these kings ever existed, but what it does suggest is that the neat, clean stories we've been told, well, they might have been very carefully crafted. So the real question for you to think about is this. Does a discovery like this change history itself, or does it just change how we understand the way history was written? And you have to wonder, if these foundational records were deliberately structured, what other secrets, what other hidden patterns are still just waiting to be found in the pages of our past?